It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Now, you can get a hold of me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you reach out to me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Now, otherwise, if you need to get a hold of me about the radio show, it's oppermanreport.com. If you like our show, check out our Patreon, the Opperman Report Patreon. Everything you hear Monday to Friday on AM/FM radio, you can find over at Patreon with all the ads and the commercials cut out. And then every Friday night, 14 years, 3 hours of brand new podcast content, 1 hour solo, and then 2 hours of brand new podcast interviews, Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Plays, iHeart, all the great platforms there. Our guest today is the legendary Dave Emory. Been around 47 years of anti-fascist radio. You can find him at spitfirelist.com or on Patreon, the Dave Emory Patreon. He's on X. He makes a rare appearance on X. He goes on there and gives us some brilliant content on there. Otherwise, Dave's been so kind. He's been inviting me on just about once a month to go on his Patreon to some live broadcast he does on Patreon to talk about the Epstein affair to Epstein, I think he calls it. And we have him today here, and he has going to give us some of his wisdom, and we're lucky to have him. Mr. Dave Emory, are you here?
I am here. I don't know how I'm going to do in the wisdom category, but I'm going to do my best. I guess when one gets old, one is supposed to have wisdom, and I would like to think that I do. I have accumulated a certain amount of that, but yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Ed, and it also is a pleasure to have you talking about what I call the affair Epstein. Again, we hear all about, it's the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, Mossad, 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 but actually it goes in many different directions. It goes in an awful lot of different directions. The something that these days, the older I get, and I'm a pretty old guy now, the crazier things get, and we've been treated, and that's a really dubious term, to the political manifestations of a woman named Anna Paulina Luna, with a Nazi grandfather, heavily networked with the AfD in Germany, the neo-Nazi party there, and my nickname for her, Ed, is Anna Paulina Lunatic.
Yeah.
And she is mixing in her hearings into all kinds of things, including the Epstein files and 9/11 and things that are substantive. For example, the JFK assassination, the Martin Luther King assassination. I guess she's also now going to do the Robert Kennedy assassination. And things that are, MK Ultra mind control, but she is mixing this in with the craziest stuff in the world. She took her oath using the Ethiopian Bible, which still has the Book of Enoch in it. And she has been talking all about, space aliens and how the Bible talks about aliens and all this stuff. And she, in turn, has networked with people like Representative Burchett. I think he's from Tennessee. And people from Team Trump who've been talking about, we've got aliens and alien DNA and all this stuff and alien technology, et cetera, et cetera. Before we get into the substance, and maybe that's the wrong word, of, Anna Paulina Lunatic, as I call her. Again, that's my name. Her name is Representative Anna Paulina Luna. And she, among other things, feels that Donald Trump belongs on Mount Rushmore, which that's interesting in and of itself. But I am a firm believer in sticking to the relevant documentation. I refer to myself, Ed, as a journalistic step-up transformer. There's nothing that I've ever done that isn't already on the public record, but it became apparent to me a long time ago that most people simply are not aware of what is on the public record. So I've begun doing that. Whereas Paul Revere rode through the streets of Boston at midnight shouting, "And the redcoats are coming, the redcoats are coming." I've been using the radio to shout, the brown shirts are here, the brown shirts are here. They killed the president. We've got to do something. And I never imagined that people's response would be, "Hey, shut up down there. We're trying to sleep," you know. But with regard to flying saucers and aliens, uh, going back to the really just before World War II, a technology that's quite well known to people, namely radar, was invented, and it's related to radio. It sends a concentrated beam of electrons out. And when that beam of electrons encounters a right angle, it produces a contact or a blip. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the essence of it. So from the very beginning of World War II, there was a premium placed on the development of aircraft that avoided right angles in the configuration of the airframe. Well, obviously, a disc is a good way to do that. The U.S. Navy was experimenting with disc-shaped aircraft. However, they proved to be unstable, and I haven't, since this is audio, I can't really go into the development of, quote, flying saucers, unquote. But to make a very long story very short, they were developed as sophisticated anti-aircraft devices near the end of World War II. And I'd like to read a short section, Ed, from a book called JFK and the Unspeakable: Why He Died and Why It Matters by James W. Douglas, and copyright 2008. Now, this alludes to a guy named Robert Vinson, last name Vinson, and he was in the military, and he was on board a C-54 transport that touched down in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd, 1963. And an Oswald double wearing khaki fatigues walked onto the plane, didn't say a word, and walked up to the front of the aircraft. And obviously, this caught Vincent's attention. I mean, supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald was in custody, but here was an obvious double climbing onto a military transport and not saying a word and being transported to points distant. But after that, he was assigned to another position in the military, I believe the Air Force, and he was quoted as follows. And again, this is from the book JFK and the Unspeakable: Why He Died and Why It Matters by James W. Douglas. On his new assignment, Robert Vinson would learn that the CIA's projects out of Site 51 included experimental aircraft shaped like saucers. The same was true at the CIA's other base at Roswell, New Mexico, where the C-54 carrying the second Oswald had landed. Both Site 51 and Roswell were home to, quote, flying saucers, unquote, that people saw periodically in the area. They, in fact, came not from outer space, but from the CIA, which encouraged the flying saucer reports. Basically, people were encouraged to think, wow, it must come from outer space, must be aliens. I mean, good, blah, 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 blah. Now, the following is an excerpt from the obituary of Eric von Daniken, who wrote the book Chariots of the Gods. Now, this is from the New York Times of January 11th of 2026. It's an obituary. Eric von Daniken, who claimed the aliens visited Earth, dies at 90. It's by Mike P, capital P-E-D. And again, from the New York Times of 1/11/2026, January of this year. He, von Daniken, wrote the manuscript for what became Chariots of the Gods while managing the Hotel Russenhügel in Davos, Switzerland. At the hotel's bar one day, he met the editor of a Swiss science magazine, who introduced Mr. von Daniken to an executive at Econ Verlag, capital E-C-O-N hyphen capital V-E-R-L-A-G, a Swiss publishing house. Econ Verlag agreed to print 6,000 copies of what was originally titled Memories of the Future, but only after hiring Wilhelm Rogersdorf, first name capital Wilaghln, last name capital Roggersdorf, who had edited the Nazi newspaper Völkische Beobachter to rework much of the manuscript. Once again, Econ Verlag agreed to publish what became Chariots of the Gods, but only after hiring Wilhelm Rogersdorf, who had edited the Nazi newspaper Völkische Beobachter, to rework much of it. And I mention that because, again, we are being treated to some very tasty details uh, from Anna Paulina Lunatic and company. Again, she has enthused over a couple of Daily Mail stories, which in turn were based on the a story in the Weekly World News. People may remember that. That makes the National Enquirer look like the Encyclopedia Britannica, the Weekly World News. And I'm going to ask. I'm going to apologize, Ed, to you and your audience. There may be times when I'm going to chuckle about this, and indeed, some of the things that we're encountering in connection with the aliens must have visited Earth or are here or are living among us or whatever. Again, I was doing a Patreon Zoomcast, and I was reading from an article from the Daily Mail about the Nordics, right? And I got a bad case of the giggles. I couldn't stop laughing. But again, Anna Paulina Lunatic was gushing about a couple of articles in the Daily Mail of the UK, and they have some good articles in the Daily Mail, but these in turn were based again on material that had appeared in the Weekly World News, which makes the National Enquirer look like the Encyclopedia Britannica. The Weekly World News, people may remember that was the tabloid that had Bat Boy, right? And he was solving all the world's problems and meeting with Hillary Clinton and aliens and you name it. I mean, uh, but Anna Paulina Lunatic, as I call her, was gushing over the story that, yep, actually there were chambers beneath the pyramids. And Elon Musk was gushing about this as well. And he had previously opined that the aliens were, excuse me, that the Great Pyramids were built by aliens. And Anna Paulina Luna has endorsed that and all kinds of crazy things. She has been having hearings about how really, yes, aliens have visited us and we have alien technology that we've been developing. And, you know, the notion that a quote flying saucer unquote. They're real. They don't come from outer space. I mean, you've seen a frisbee, right?
Yeah.
Well, a frisbee is a disc-shaped airfoil, and when the motive force of one's hand is applied to it, it flies. Okay. Well, the notion that the government wouldn't be able to make a frisbee, or the aerospace industry wouldn't be able to make a frisbee, given the premium that was placed on building aircraft that avoided right angles in the configuration of the airframe, it is beyond credibility. The notion that, yes, you know, alien, we have alien technology that we reverse engineered from crashes, blah, 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 blah. That's kind of like maintaining that you had, I mean, you bought a brand new Lamborghini and you were driving it across country and it broke down outside of Salt Lake City. So you went into town to get a tow truck. And when you came back, you found that your car had been hijacked by an ant colony. I mean, it's just, again, forgive me for laughing. It is so crazy. But again, flying saucers are real. There is no, they don't come from outer space. And the whole aliens okey doke is absolutely surreal. And I'm going to read just a very, very short section from a Daily Mail article. And this is from the Daily Mail of, um, actually, I'm going to just read a very short section. CIA accused of using Ancestry and 23andMe to, quote, hunt down, unquote, alien bloodlines in millions of DNA tests. And basically, the CIA has been accused of gaining secret access to the DNA information of millions of people as the intelligence agency allegedly searches for alien life on Earth. Jason Reza Jorjami, Jorjami, a philosophy PhD and science fiction writer, note that, recently claimed that he spoke with a retired U.S. Army sergeant who served as a psychic spy, unquote, and knew of the government's secret program to hunt down individuals with extraterrestrial DNA. And to make a long story short,
What's the plan? What are they going to do when they when they track them down? I'm going to hunt down.
well, what I wonder about is whether actually the CIA is harnessing DNA to do all kinds of things, maybe develop ethno-specific biological weapons that will kill certain groups of people and not others. But again, Giorgiani talks about the fact that, yes, they're among the alien races that are living among us, right? According to the author, the purpose is to look for individuals who have DNA ancestry tied to a race of aliens known as the Nordics, who allegedly look like extremely tall humans from Scandinavia with blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. In other words, quote, Aryans, unquote. Now, bear in mind the fact that the editor of the Nazi of the Völkische Beobachtung of the Nazi Party paper was hired to rework the manuscript of von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. And this is just great. And skipping down in this, um, he alleges that three Nordics walked into a diner in Colorado. He says, although Giorgione said they live in small towns in the Colorado Rockies and they pass because they look like tall Scandinavian people. Although Giorgione did not reveal the date and location of the incident, he claimed that Buchanan was approached by three Nordics in a diner who explained that the members of this alien race had traveled to Earth in order to escape their own world's tyrannical, unquote, government. I mean, it doesn't that sound like the start of a bad joke? And, three Nordics walk into a diner, right? I mean, give me a break. And again, it's very hard for me to read this stuff and not start laughing. But this is being mixed in by Anna Paulina Luna, or Anna Paulina Lunatic, as I call her, uh, with all kinds of things that were actually very credible, like at least up to a point, the JFK assassination, Martin Luther King assassination, Robert Kennedy assassination, and the official versions are nonsense. And yet this is being mixed in with, the aliens are among us, the aliens are visiting us, and so forth. And it's Missouri Congressman Eric Burleson, Burlison, has stated that President Trump was told about the alleged existence of at least four alien species humans secretly know about. Moreover, Burleson and retired U.S. fleet, unquote, on the Nordics, creating alien human hybrids. Well, again, I'm afraid, imagine if global warming gets worse, and it looks like it's going to, and who knows what's going to happen with the economy? Who knows what's going to happen with the war in the Middle East? I can't see how this isn't going to end with a mushroom cloud or two or three rising over someplace. But it is, I think, very dangerous for us to place our faith in the likes of Anna Paulina Luna and the notion that, yes, we've been visited by ancient aliens and that there's proof of this in the Bible. The New York Post, which, by the way, is a Rupert Murdoch newspaper, an article by Ben Cost, COST, published on April 22nd of this year, Representative Anna Paulina Luna claims ancient Bible story about fallen angels depicts aliens invading Earth. The truth is in plain sight, unquote. And she is, endorsing all this stuff. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, is drawing shocking parallels between extraterrestrials and the Bible in a series of viral X posts with millions of views. Read the Book of Enoch, unquote, the politician wrote in one of the posts, which is pinned to the top of her account. Luna, who is the acting chairwoman of the House Oversight Committee tasked with declassifying state secrets, was referring to a Jewish religious text written between 300 and 1000 300 and 100 BC that referenced Noah's great-grandfather, Enoch. But the Enoch's Book of Watchers, the divisive scripture describes how a coalition of 200 angels, known as the Watchers, arrived on Earth and procreated with human women who later gave birth to an ancient race of giants that preceded the biblical flood. And it goes on and on. But the point that I'm making here, Ed, is that we are being presented with stuff which is pure hokum. And yet, because, quote, flying saucers are real, and they are real, there was late World War II technology. Who knows what they've been able to do since? I think we are being, at least psychologically and perhaps politically, prepped for any one of a number of possibilities of UFO ops. On the one hand, there are space aliens and they're hostile. The late Werner von Braun was the head of America's space program. He also was an SS officer. I mean, he has gone down in history as sort of an apolitical, at least the powers that be want us to believe he was kind of an apolitical technocrat. I like the late political comedian Mort Saul's take on his biography, von Braun's biography. I aim for the stars. And then Mort Saul says, but the subject is, but occasionally I hit London, right? Again, very, just, what, just incidentally,
That's a great
uh,
line, yeah.
it is really good. Maybe the only Mort Saul line better than that was the line, a liberal's idea of courage is eating at a restaurant that hasn't been reviewed yet.
What minds do we have like Mort Saul these days? You know what I mean? Nobody.
None of them, sadly, very sadly. We've got minds, and that's using the term very loosely, like Anna Luna. Help. But now, Werner von Braun was the head of America's space program. He also was an SS officer. He also was the co-founder of an organization called the Institute for Noetic Sciences. That's Noetic. That references Noah's flood. Okay, that's what Noetic refers to. That is one of the epicenters of the so-called New Age. And maybe this is going to trample on some people's religious toes. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Uh, the New Age has been really big, or segments of it have been really big on, yes, flying saucers are real. And yes, we've been visited by aliens. And much of the New Age references something called the Nine. Now, these are variously represented as, the gods of Egypt, ancient aliens, you name it. But there are nine of them, and they're represented as tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned space aliens. And supposedly all of us have evolved from them, except, of course, for black people. And, what I see, Ed, is the possible fusing of the Nazi Aryan ideal, the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned Aryan, And again, von Daniken's manuscript, The Chariots of the Gods, which maybe we could do as the seabed for Anna Paulina Luna's manifestations, uh, is uh, something I think we really need to be careful of. When the economy, or if the economy collapses, I'm not afraid it might, when global warming is destroying nations, and when people are even more ignorant than they are today, and something like 54% of the American people read at a fifth or sixth grade level, depending. Let's say sixth grade level. That's the higher estimate I've heard. And 1 in 8 is illiterate. I mean, that is really scary to think that people could begin believing in this stuff. But again, Anna Paulina Luna believes in this stuff. And more from this Daily Mail article, or excuse me, more from this New York Post article. The Republicans' apparent Martian-related Bible stories aren't limited to the Old Testament either. Just minutes after her initial expose, the lawmaker uploaded an image of Madonna and child with the infant St. John, unquote, a painting credited to Domenico Ghirlandaio, capital Girlandaio, that depicts the Virgin Mary praying with the baby Jesus. Colloquially known as Our Lady of the Flying Saucer or Madonna of the UFO, unquote, the opus has drawn attention due to the inclusion of a circular object seemingly shooting rays, which some claim is a dome-shaped spacecraft. And again, don't lose sight of the fact that Eric von Daniken's The Chariots of the Gods, which were all this about the ancient aliens and so forth, comes from. Uh, that manuscript was published only after being reworked by Wilhelm Rogensdorf, who was the former editor of the Völkische Biographie, the Nazi Party paper. So I think we need to be on guard here for any one of a number of possible UFO ops. Again, when people are on their knees, when the economy has collapsed, when they have nothing to eat, when they find themselves battling former Army Rangers for rat killing turf, uh, and suddenly someone says, "Wait, look up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's space aliens from Uranus," and down come the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned space aliens, right? And I think we need to be on guard for that. I think we also need to be on guard for the notion that we must develop, more military technology in order to defend against the hostile aliens. And I'm not going to read too much from the articles here, but again, supposedly NASA has footage of UFOs and space aliens. There's one that supposedly looks like an angel with wings. And again, I'm not trying to trample on anyone's religious beliefs' toes, to coin a term, but at the same time, this country does have freedom of religion. And, I think that in all probability is a supreme being, but I don't think it is. It comes down in the flying saucer. And I don't think Anna Paulina Luna, she, by the way, claims, at one point she claimed to be a Messianic Jew. In other words, of Jewish extraction, but believes in the Jesus as the Messiah. Her relatives claim she was raised in the Roman Catholic religion. My understanding, Ed, is that you also have run into some of and I'm going to put this delicately, manifestations of Anna Paulina Luna. Can you maybe fill the audience in on those?
Well, yeah. I think did I ever get around to sending you that recording of her with her primary opponent? Because she is my elected official. She's where I live in in Pinellas County.
Lucky you. This is your elected representative, huh?
And
Wow.
I gotta tell you, I'm convinced she's listened to my show back when I was on what was it? It was 1400 in the morning. I think it was 1440, something like that. WPPR radio in Bradenton, Florida. And they used to call it Actually, one of the hosts in the morning used to call the letters WPPR, White Power Radio.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know, man. Okay, this guy would get on in the morning, and he came down from the Northeast to because this was known as like the down here in Florida, where it was like an area where you could flip the state. You know, if you could elect enough people. So that was his plan to get the right wingers elected down here, and he would go on in the morning. And he'd go, "There's a card-carrying communist on this very station every night." And so
but wait, that card-carrying communist being you, Ed?
it was me, yeah. Yeah. And then
No doubt.
he would try and come on and make excuses for Trump and Epstein and stuff. He would listen to the show at night, then come on and berate me in the morning, not by name, but by whatever, my topics and stuff. So all the people that Anna Paulina Luna has on her panels there are all people I've interviewed. You know, James Eugenio and Tom O'Neill. You know, I know all these guys. You know, what was the other one? Anyway, but the thing is,
Well, and they've done some really good work. You know, I consider Tom O'Neill and Jimmy Eugenio and Oliver Stone, who was one of her was on one of her hearings, and also a guy named Matt Compton. I consider them all to be heroes of the capital H. But you know, my concern, Ed, is that she is mixing in.
oh no, yeah,
You know, things that are valid, things that are important with the capital I and maybe valid with the capital V, with this absolute hokum. And maybe you know better than I do, Ed, you know, because I am scared bleepless about this, because I think what it is going to do is to give credibility to the most wackadoodle stuff. I mean, yeah, wow, you know, I mean, the Bible talks about aliens, and oh, wow, look, there goes a flying saucer right now. Here come the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordics. You know what I mean? Holy mackerel. I mean, it's just...
You know what strikes me about that too? All this stuff about the ancient aliens and the aliens built the pyramids and all these things. What really popped, because I was a fan of Von Dijk, and I saw that movie when I was a kid. I went to the movies and saw that in 1976. You know, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But when they really started pushing this stuff, it was on the History Channel. They stopped doing history on the History Channel and started doing all this UFOs, aliens, all this stuff, you know, over and over and over. And who owns the History Channel? Rupert Murdoch.
Yep.
Yep.
And he's a big backer of Donald Trump. And I guess Trump has a podcast or TV outlet, and they've been having, you know, the ancient aliens and the lizard people and all kinds of stuff. You know, I'm getting old in my old age, Ed, and I am, you know, I don't. Well, as Yossarian, the central figure in Joseph Heller's novel Catch 22 said, "I intend to live forever or die trying." But at the same time, I'm kind of glad I'm old, and I just feel so sorry for young people today, and I feel that the older generations, you know, maybe my generation, the much ballyhooed and, in my opinion, incalculably overrated baby boomers, should really feel ashamed of themselves. The world that they have left for the young people is just going to be a horror show. And so back to Anna Paulina Luna. Again, she was actually on some of the programs on the station you originally began on.
You know what? She might have. I didn't begin on that station, but I was on there. I don't know if she was ever a guest on there, but I believe she listened to my shows, and because a lot of those same people that she has now on her panels there are people that have had guests on my show. But the first I heard of her was locally. She was running in the primary, and she gets on a phone call with her primary opponent, who was an ally of hers. These guys were friends. And this guy, if I didn't send you the recording, I got to apologize, because I know I've told you about it before. And the guy's on there, and he's rambling, going on and on, talking about he has like $6 billion from the Illuminati, Bavarian Illuminati, is funding his campaign. He has access to billions of dollars. And then he starts talking about how he has access to this Russian-Ukrainian hit squad to go out and kill his enemies. Now, I believe this guy was charged for this. Okay. So she's on the phone with this guy, and she tape records this call. I believe he faced some kind of criminal charges. And she's just going along with him like it's normal, like she's agreeing with him. Now, I got to tell you, man, if someone, she was taping it to use it, for her own uses later on, so maybe she doesn't believe him or whatever. She thought it was so crazy. But I can't imagine somebody being on the phone with me and rambling such insanity and thinking that I would just believe it. Like there has to be a foothold there before you bring that kind of stuff up. I'm not going to start talking to Dave Emory about Nazis and about how Nazis are great. You know what I mean? Because I know I'm not going to get a foothold there. So this guy somehow knew that she was just off on another planet, man. With her theories and her beliefs.
Oh, and maybe that would be. I don't know if she said in interviews that she never personally has been on a spaceship, but she believes this stuff. And I again, it's hard for me to talk about this without laughing, and yet maybe my laughter could be place it in the context of one of my favorite quotes, which comes from the German philosopher Nietzsche, who observed that, quote, a joke is the epigram on the death of a feeling. And when I consider Anna Paulina Luna and all this stuff, it's just about the feelings by and what is your maybe you know more about people than I do. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. My feeling is that the spin this is more likely to give people is that, wow, if the government covered up the JFK assassination, which
Right.
they did, and if the government covered up the Martin Luther King assassination, which they did, and if the government covered up the Robert Kennedy assassination, which they did, and if they were affecting mind control, and some of the topics brought up in those hearings were good ones, but I've heard really horrible things about the hearings themselves. My feeling is that what it is going to do is to give credibility to the worst sort of hokum. I mean, wow, the Bible describes ancient aliens, and NASA has footage of one quote UFO, unquote, supposedly have wings like an angel. I mean, it's just, and again, I'm not trying to step on people's religious toes. But what's your feeling on that? I am afraid what that's going to do is just give credibility to the worst sort of BS.
I hear you. Right, but also too, it discredits the other investigations. It discredits the information that came out about JFK and that's coming out about RFK and the stuff that came out about MKUltra, especially because that's easily you can easily say that was crazy,
But that's an excellent point. So in other words, this is there was that old ad for what a breath name, two mints in one. On the one hand, it's going to give credibility for the people who maybe aren't wrapped too tight. So wow, the government lied about this. They must be lying about aliens and flying saucers and all that. And then on the other hand, the people, the New York Times people and all that, and here Dr. Professor thus and such in the gymnasium, they're going to go, well, of course, I mean, what do you expect? This is all a bunch of craziness. One of the guys who is frequently cited as an authority that, all this stuff about, conspiracies about JFK and RFA and so forth. It's just, paranoid. Is a guy named Richard Hofstadter. And his most famous book is one called The Paranoid Style in American Politics. And his work was actually subsidized by the CIA, and his book is taken from a lecture that he gave. I think it was at Cambridge University. It was in the UK at the university on November 21st of 1963. Well, that's a really interesting time to have been giving a lecture like that. And again, this guy's work is subsidized by the CIA. And but again, I can see that exactly the point you made and its validity. Oh, well, we've been telling you all along that, Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy and he was a lone nut. And James Earl Ray killed Martin Luther King and he was a lone nut racist. And Saran killed Robert Kennedy because of his support for Israel, blah, 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 blah. Despite the fact that the physical evidence and a whole lot of other things are very strongly, well, they disprove that. So yeah, I think it's a double dose of dynamite, so to speak. On the one hand, giving credibility to the worst sort of fresh fertilizer disseminated by Farmer Luna, and then maybe also basically buffering the Morning Post for the worst sorts of, oh, well, we've warned you about all these crazy people with all their crazy theories. So, go to college and do your homework and get your PhD and read the New York Times and the Washington Post and don't believe any of this crazy stuff. So, yeah, oh, man.
Well, not only that,
Oh,
but unless you sit there and you listen to the whole hearing and digest the whole thing, all you get is these little clips, like this clip of Tom O'Neill saying that Manson and Jack Ruby were MK Ultra. And when you hear that, you say, "Wow, what? Well, how could that be? What are you talking about?" They didn't know each other. You know what I mean? How can they be part of the same? That's crazy. You know what I mean? It's they got the media is filtering this information out. First you got Anna Paulina Luna picking the people, picking the information, picking the topics, the questions, and then you got the media filtering it out what they're going to present before us. It's a
yeah, Tom O'Neill wrote a really valuable book, and I give him all the credit in the world. He contacted me back in about the year 2000 when he was first beginning his investigation with an article for Details magazine, and I gave him some information about the Manson family, and far from being just a bunch of wayward hippies, which is how they've been represented. The available evidence suggests very strongly that they were basically the Manson family and the murders they committed was a domestic intelligence operation. And I know that in O'Neill's book Chaos, he talks about contacting his editors, and he said, I know you're not going to like this, but you know, I'm 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 covering information linking this to the CIA. And then he said, I know you're not going to like this either, but it's going back to the Kennedy assassination, even JFK. And you can see in Tom O'Neill's manifested literary consciousness, to coin a term, you can see the self-consciousness that he's feeling. He's feeling, oh my God, they're gonna diss me as a conspiracy theorist. They're gonna say, oh, this guy is wackadoodle, blah 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 blah. And yet, I would hold Tom O'Neill up as being arguably exemplary of what an investigative reporter or author should be, because as self-conscious as he clearly felt about the things he was uncovering, he was a good old dog, and he just kept pursuing it, and he kept doing the research, and eventually he unpacked tremendous information about the Manson family and mind control, and a guy named Louis Jolyon West, who was one of the top
yeah,
uh, CIA and military mind control scientists, and he uh, apparently scrambled Jack Ruby's eggs when Jack Ruby was making noise about having been part of a conspiracy. And he also was tangentially apparently involved with the Manson family as well. And again, Tom O'Neill did a fabulous book, but, you know, having his magnificent work basically placed in what I would consider to be uh, like a carnival sideshow circus sort of atmosphere with, Emma Paulina we were talking about, well, this, and then we've got, other people. And then we're talking about the ancient aliens. And yeah,
yeah.
the Bible talks about them. And, the pyramids were built by aliens and all this stuff. Um, again, I think you hit the nail on the head. I was wondering, is this going to give credibility to all the hocus pocus again? I mean, it sounds like the start of a bad joke. Three Nordics walk into a diner, right? Um, and that was one of the things that Mr. Giorgiani spoke about was that three Nordics walked into either him or an associate in the diner and said, look, we're just trying to, keep a low profile, keep living a peaceful life here on Earth. 'Cause we came here to escape the tyrannical people from our own planet. I wonder.
Escaping those woke liberals from Zortan.
I wonder about that. And I could see very easily, maybe at some point, maybe after the economy has collapsed and, the planet, the ecology has collapsed and, people have no education. Again, they're going out every morning to battle former army rangers for rat killing turf and they have nothing to eat. And then, wow, look, wow, what's that in the sky? Oh, wow, it's a flying saucer. And here come the Nordics, and they say, greetings, people of Earth. We are from the planet, whatever is Zortan. And, we came here to escape the terrible, oppressive liberal. I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I can see, oh, God.
Yeah. You mentioned that too. Tom O'Neill also too came to me before he wrote the book about some material I had from Maury Terry had given me that Maury Terry had claimed was immigration, INS, Immigration Naturalization Service investigative reports. One was about Sirhan Sirhan attending parties over at Sharon Tate's house, and another one was about the Process Church and their connection to Charles Manson. So I had gotten my hands on these things, and people had heard about that I had them. And Tom O'Neill came to me. I gave him those. Now, you and me had talked off the air a few times about you believe that a lot of that stuff was fed to Maury Terry by Ted Gunderson. Was that you?
I don't think it was you and I, but Maury Perry, by the way, he was the author of a really good book called The Ultimate Evil
Yeah.
about the Manson family, Manson and the Son of Sam killings. And I think that it's a very important book. And one of the things it talks about is, quote, Satanism, unquote, as a front for various kinds of criminal and intelligence
Oh, yeah.
manifestations. And for people who think, oh my God, well, there goes Dave Emory again. Wow, but how crazy can it get? Um, the Army's top psychological warfare expert at one point was Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Aquino, a former Green Beret and a member of Mensa. He was a genius. And he was the head of a satanic cult called the Temple of Set. And part of the acolytes' uh, upbringing, part of their spiritual enlightenment, they had to read things like Mein Kampf, Hitler's autobiography and political manifestation, and things about the Vehm or the Fema, the assassination program that paved the way for Hitler's rise to power, and other things that were, not particularly spiritual. And Aquino himself is reported to have been the illegitimate son of an SS officer who had a child by an artist who loved the Nazis. So again, this sounds, wow, crazy stuff, man. Satanists and intelligence activity. Consider the Temple of Set and that. But now back to Ted Gunderson. I don't believe that was you and I talking about that, but I do think that. Manson, certainly he was not, as far as I can tell, a member of the process troops, but he did have some dealings with them. And so, uh, those are two separate entities. And as far as INS documents about Salam attending parties at Sharon Tate's, that's something that, I would have to say, I'm from Missouri.
You ever heard that?
No,
All right,
that's
I'll
the
send it
first
to
thing
you.
I've
I'll
ever
send it to you. I
heard.
got that from the Maury Terry. A lot of people claim that Gunderson was feeding him information, uh, maybe disinformation, because you got to remember Ted Gunderson was COINTELPRO. Ted Gunderson worked the Los Angeles FBI office during COINTELPRO when they were killing Black Panthers. You know what I mean? There's no way around that. I had a client right before Ted Gunderson's death who I was dealing with, and she had gone down to the FBI office in Los Angeles, and she said that Ted Gunderson was still working for the FBI up until the end. Okay?
Wow.
Right? You know, she had no reason. She didn't know my connection to Ted Gunderson. She had no reason to lie to me. It was just came up. Then I just recently, I interviewed Tony Spurl, who's in those circles. He was one of Larry Flint's bodyguards. He worked with Larry Flint's bodyguards. He was a private investigator for Bill Menser, who's in prison right now for doing hired assassinations. He killed Roy Radin. He was involved in the Roy Radin murder. And I was talking to Tony Spurl. I've known him for a long time. And he's not always frank about his beliefs and his activities, but I believe him sometimes. He has a lot of good information that I trust. And he mentioned to me, because I had always suspected that Ted Gunderson worked for FBI right up until the end. Now, Ted Gunderson had a lawsuit with Art Bell. I knew Art Bell. And when I helped Art Bell settle a different lawsuit with a guy named John David Oates, I says, well, I'm on a roll here. Let me call up Ted Gunderson because he's on a lawsuit with Bell, too. Maybe I can settle this one, too. If I can do this, right? I'm doing great here. So I call up Gunderson, and he says, no. I'm not worried about that. My insurance company's taking care of that. My insurance is taking care of it. So, and he told me that his private investigators' errors and omissions insurance was taking care of that lawsuit. Now, at the time, I wasn't in radio. I didn't know. I have errors and omissions insurance for my PI business, but I know now that it doesn't cover what I do on the radio. Okay, I didn't know that then. Then later on, after the whole thing, he says, well, I regret that I let the insurance company handle it. I should have fought this because his insurance company paid it out. Now, just recently, talking to Tony Spurl, who once again was Larry Flint's bodyguard, he's in the mix with all these guys, Bill Menser and Nicholas Schreck and all these characters. You know, he's in that mix, man, for sure. He tells me, well, he talked to Gunderson too, and Gunderson told him he regretted the Art Bell settlement because he could not go back on radio. His insurance wouldn't cover him on radio anymore. So again, it's a kind of a confirmation of what I've always suspected about Gunderson and his insurance and how this insurance could have paid off that lawsuit. It wasn't radio insurance, and his PI insurance couldn't have paid it off. So it had to be FBI insurance.
Could very well be. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You know, something that I want to interject.
Yeah.
I forgot to talk about this. You know, in terms of what we may eventually see. 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago now, this was in 1985, there was an article, I think it was on the front page of the New York Times, and it spoke about a genetic engineering experiment in which a gene from a firefly was inserted into a tobacco leaf. And the result was a tobacco leaf that glowed like a firefly. And that was amazing to me because here you have a gene from an insect being inserted into a plant and having this and manifesting the same physical characteristic in the plant that it did in the insect. So that makes me wonder, you know, what else have they done in the 40 plus years since then? And I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, but, you know, have they done experiments with, you know, lizards or amphibians? I mean, might we see a humanoid character with, you know, yellow eyes and vertical pupils? Again, this is pure rumination on my part, but I wonder about that. Something else that is really important to point out. And there has been documentation of this. In fact, some of the best comes from a couple of books that the author of which then went off the deep end, in my opinion. That was a guy named Jacques Vallée, Vallée. He was at one point in charge of computer sciences, I think, for at Stanford University, certainly a former Stanford faculty member. But for decades, the Pentagon has been working on using holographic projections in on the sky. So people may very well look up in the sky and see all kinds of, you know, miraculous seeming things. I mean, clouds doing this and that, or maybe quote angels, unquote, or quote UFOs looking like angels. And you name it. And people go, wow, look at that, man, must be a miracle. It must be, Jesus or God or whatever. And again, I hope I'm not trampling on anyone's religious toes here, but it's actually just holographic projections, and it's not necessarily something people should believe in. And, this may sound like, oh boy, what, Dave Emery's even crazier than I thought he was. Back in the early 60s, there was a program that was, I think it was actually developed by Edward Lansdale, working for CIA in the military. And it was called Elimination by Illumination. And the idea was to have an American submarine surface off the coast of Cuba and fire a bunch of things into the sky, which would then be portrayed as, angels or whatever. And the people in Cuba were told, Jesus is coming back and he doesn't like communists and Fidel Castro, so you need to overthrow him. So, I mean, this may sound like, wow, boy. I mean, Dave Emery sure is crazy. But take, elimination by illumination and update it for the 60 plus years since then. And, who knows what we're going to see. And again, we've got Anna Paulina Luma. And now this, her opponent in the primary campaign, he was talking about how he got, what, was it $6 or $60 million, $6 billion from the Illuminati to hire Ukrainian and Russian assassins.
I think he said he had access to it.
Oh, okay.
It was in his war chest. I don't think he actually had the cash that he could dole out at in that phone call, but he did have access. I gotta say, I blame myself that I haven't gotten around to sending you that, because I know we've talked about it several times. So as soon as we get off the phone, I'm gonna email it to you. Because it is some pretty fascinating. I just played it because it was funny at the time. I didn't know she'd be running these hearings, very important hearings, man.
They really are. They really are. And now
hearings, right? We haven't had anything like this.
Yeah, except that now these are a different kind of truth hearings. Even the ancient astronauts were really angels sent by Jesus and talked about in the book of Enoch, but they're really UFOs. I mean, oh man, I used to. The first thing that got me interested in quote flying saucers unquote, and that was a statement I saw by the late Reverend Billy Graham, who was a political animal, if nothing else, And he said the quote, "Flying saucers are real. They're angels sent by Jesus." And I said, I wonder about that one. And, among the scenarios I think we need to watch out for, and that is, if things in the Middle East spiral out of control, if we wind up with a mushroom cloud or two or three, over Israel or Iran, but God knows where, God forbid, Um, but the one of the things that is being floated is the War of Armageddon, and how there's going to be a final battle in which the forces of light will put down the forces of darkness, and then Jesus will come down, and all of the it will
come back in a cloud, yeah.
All the Jews will be forced to convert to Christianity, or they'll be killed. And that's the real final solution to the quote Jewish problem, unquote, as Hitler termed it. So, I wonder, are we being primed for something like this by Anna Paulina Luma and the Book of Enoch and the ancient astronauts? And then, yeah, the Nordics are living among us, and the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned space aliens, courtesy of, the so-called New Age. And bear in mind, again, SS Officer Werner von Braun, the head of America's space program, was also the co-founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences with the former astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And that's a major font for the New Age. So, I can really see us being primed for something like this. And, it just, wow.
Dave, on that positive note, we're out of time. We'll be going off to bed now with all our in tears. Dave Emory leaving us in a ball of tears and fears and woes. We've been speaking to Dave Emory, legendary anti-fascist radio. Find him at spitfirelist.com and also on his Patreon, the Dave Emory Patreon. And I'm on it almost once a month. So if you listen to the Opera Report, you got to check out Dave Emory. This guy was around way before. I don't want him to say he's only 10 years older than me, but has been doing this for a long, long time. Great, legendary Dave Emory. Great to have you on the show, my friend.
Well, it is my pleasure, and looking forward to speaking with you on my Pat Down platform on August 22nd. More about Raphael Epstein.
There you go, man. Thank you so much, Dave. Good night.
My pleasure.